Tara from the Niles District Library, and welcome to our brand new web series called 10 Questions, where we ask you to ask us questions that we ask to people, if that makes any sense. It makes sense in my brain. So we have got some great questions for our first guest, Brad Paquette. Welcome with us.
Hi guys.
All right, so we asked the students at Niles New Tech to ask 10 questions of Brad, and so we've got some amazing questions from the students at New Tech. So thank you guys for submitting those great questions for us, and to Mr. Holtgren for helping me find the right teachers to talk to. All right, so are you ready to do this?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do this. How long did you think about switching from a facilitator at New Tech to a Michigan State representative?
So after teaching for a couple of different years, I started inquiring a lot about our process and how decisions are made around education.
Yeah.
And so probably I was 3 or 4 years into teaching, and we switched our teacher evaluation system. And so I started questioning, like, okay, why did we do this? Because it was impacting our classroom, who were making these decisions and what for. And I started actually looking into the laws about that. And so I was asked the question as well, is like, if we can't better our system of education, who's going to? And so after kind of exploring that a little bit, I taught some civics. I had a lot of really inquisitive young people who I was trying to push to get involved, and they're like, well, what are you doing in life? And like, that makes a lot of sense, and especially if you're teaching civics, you need to live it.
Yes.
And so with those two things in mind, I saw that we have very strict term limits here in the state of Michigan. And my predecessor, Dave Pagel, he was being term limited out. And I saw a couple of people that were running for the spot, and I'm like, I could maybe beat them. And so I started knocking on some doors. So about a year-ish, I was thinking about a year and a half, okay. Pretty intensely. So.
All right. That's great.
For sure.
Obviously it worked out well for you because you won.
Yep. And threw the kitchen sink at it. So.
All right. All right. So during your time in office, how has this time impacted teams?
Well, especially with coronavirus, so I get to chair the education budget right now.
Okay.
So this is my first year chairing that budget, and with trying to figure out what the best decisions are for teens, I think with sports and with masks in school, those are probably the two biggest things that we've been working on. So with sports in general, we've been questioning a lot of the decisions about, you know, why are kids having to wear masks in particular while playing soccer outdoors, for instance. And so we've been putting pressure on the health department to kind of open that up, because in some other states it's kind of optional. If you want to wear a mask, you can. There was a study from the University of Wisconsin that tested about 9,000 kids with, they hadn't been wearing masks, and I guess there were about 100 cases, no hospitalizations. So we were pointing to that to try to really open up the fact that kids probably shouldn't have to be wearing masks, or they should be able to play sports at least with a mask. So we put a lot of pressure on that, and then also with figuring out how to take on this impact of being isolated and being away from friends and not even having school. That's had a pretty deep impact on the mental health. So I would say that some of our decisions there on what we've been trying to do to bring a sense of normalcy back and some balance within this all has been huge.
Yeah, I'm feeling that as an adult, the isolation.
Me too.
And having Zoom meetings with our library staff, and I was just so happy to see somebody other than my children, whom I love. But it's so nice to see other people too.
And we're very social people, so
yes.
Not being around people is very, very difficult.
Yes, the dog doesn't talk as much as other people.
Not at all.
So they're interested to know, what are your thoughts on year-round school?
So I think it should be an option. I think with coronavirus in mind, it's opened up a lot of doors on rethinking how we do a lot of things, whether it be in businesses. A lot of people are working from home now. Do they need to have this big building that they go drive to and sit in the office now? And striking a balance in that. So I think with school in mind, we actually put in about $150,000 grants per districts that if they want to apply for this, they could get air conditioning and transfer, I guess, some of these processes to allow for school during the summer if people so choose. But I really think it comes down to what the parent, what the learner wants in regard to that. Because some parents, they just want to travel for summer, enjoy the summer off with the kids. I did when I was in school. I probably would have been like, nah, I'd prefer to keep it the way it is. But I think a big question about that is starting school later. Because starting school at 7:30 a.m., I don't think that's productive for anybody. So if maybe we have a shorter day, but it goes a little longer in the school year, maybe 3 days a week, 4 days a week, allowing a district to choose that or figure that out themselves with their parents in mind. I think that's the push that I've been making with balanced calendar.
Yeah. That would have been great.
Yeah.
I'm not awake till about noon. And
I know.
My
My first couple classes I slept through, even kind of when I was teaching. Sorry, everybody. might have some former students that
We can
are
edit that
watching this. No, I always drank like a half a pot of coffee, so I was blessed.
All right. So, what is it like being our state rep? And is it what you expected or not?
So everyone is very passionate about how to carry on in times of COVID, right, and post-COVID. Everyone's very passionate about education. So those are two things that I'm deeply involved in. And so when you, like, I have two buttons on my desk, a yes and a no. And when we vote on bills, I can only vote yes or a no. And so when you vote yes, you are going to sooner or later make someone pretty angry. So I've had a lot of very good friends that I have made upset.
Okay.
I love to have the conversations with them, but it's a difficult aspect because you can only choose one or the other.
Right.
And sooner or later, you're going to make somebody upset because you can't agree with everyone all the time. And especially when a lot of these bills are very complex or they have far-reaching consequences. And once you kind of understand a little bit more from a different vantage point, it's hard, well, it comes down to communicating a lot. So it's very different in the sense that politics, especially in this era, is very divisive. And so people who realize that, oh, I'm a Republican, and now they're like, oh, well, that means you're this, this, and this, or if you're a Republican, then I like you. Like there's a dynamic that we quickly want to label others. So when I meet people, for instance, and they're like, are you a Democrat or a Republican? That's really the first question normally.
Right.
It's difficult to kind of communicate about how, most people don't align with one party or everything that a party subscribes to, or whoever the leader is. And so that's been a really interesting experience as I interact with people, because I love conversations with folks.
Yes.
And communicating about issues in deep ways. But it's easy to get wrapped up in just the D or the R by the name. So that's been interesting outside of what I was probably considering. So it's a lot more intense than I thought in that
Okay.
regard.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so what are you working on right now? What kind of projects are coming up?
A couple different things. So one of the big pieces, being a former teacher, I'm all about teacher voice. So I had a lot of decisions being made about my classroom, and in the New Tech classroom, it's a lot different than most other classrooms.
Right.
And so we had decisions that were made about our classroom for people that had never been in the classroom before. And so that was a really tough thing for me. It's the reason why I ran. And so my goal is to bring about teacher voice. And so I have a couple of structures in place that I've been working on and feeling out, where I hit walls, especially in Lansing. There are a lot of people that are adverse to change, especially the type of change that I want to usher in.
Okay.
But creating a teacher network is something that I've been working on, and getting good educators in the same room with one another, especially in this time of isolation.
Yes.
They're able to encourage each other, because especially with project-based learning in mind and my fellow colleagues at New Tech, if you talk education with other people, it's hard to kind of explain, how we think of learning. But when we met, New Tech has a huge network around the nation.
They do.
And so we would meet with other teachers that even were from Michigan. We're like, oh, I didn't know you were from Michigan. You're an hour and a half from me. Well, we need to hang out and talk education. Once you get people in the same room and get them communicating through a network aspect, it changes the game, and it brings, I have a high regard for fellowship, especially in education, because innovators that are doing new things, if they feel alone, they get attacked sometimes by trying something new. And so in our system of education, I feel like creating a network and bringing a lot of educators into the same fold and talking about how we should make policy in the state of Michigan in particular, that's something that I've been working on pretty intensely.
That's really cool.
Absolutely.
I like that. So what can kids in high school do to make change in Michigan?
Yeah, so I think that the best way to come about making change is by asking questions. And then when you get an answer that you don't think is an acceptable one, you follow up. You keep on asking that question, or you find out who to ask the question that will give you an actual answer. And so in the community, with involvement, I feel like there's been a lot of apathy in politics. So Theodore Roosevelt described back in the day that the first duty of an American citizen is not necessarily to vote, it's to be involved in community politics. Voting is very, very important, but being involved, whether it be in your school board, whether it be in your city council, those are the things that are very, very important, because we live in a society where government, especially government that's far away, shouldn't have a very big impact on citizen lives. It's more local, and local decisions are really impactful on school board levels, on the city level. And so asking questions of elected officials is key, but then also asking, okay, well, how can I play a bigger role in my community? How can I see myself fitting into the community? Those are some of the biggest things I'd say need to happen if someone wants to be involved, because it does take a lot of energy too.
Yeah.
And then when you hit a lot of these walls and you feel like you can't be productive, well, you find out, well, who can I talk to that thinks the way I do? And there are a lot of people out there that, and an example of that as well. I'm like, oh, I'm the only one that thinks that way. But as I asked more questions of other people, I found other people that kind of joined me in my pursuits.
Yeah. So speak up, teens. You have a voice and you matter.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So what would you tell someone who wants to run for office?
Well, I'd ask them to come hang out with me for a day. I'd say, yeah, come on out, come to Lansing, we'll do a little tour, come follow me around. I've had a couple of constituents join me, take me up on that as well. But getting into politics, I think, really comes down to figuring out what your foundation is. Because once you get into the world too, it's easy to get taken off in a direction that you didn't necessarily foresee. So figuring out what your foundation is, why you'd want to get into politics first, and then again building a kind of a fellowship around you of people who will encourage you, people that will keep you on track, give you a rebuke or give you some correction when you need it. Those are huge pieces for getting into politics, because if you don't have folks around you keeping you honest and saying, hey, this is what you used to be like, then you're going to probably drift off in a direction that maybe you didn't really foresee.
Okay, great. So at New Tech or in college, if you were interested in becoming a politician, what classes would you recommend that these kids and teens take?
I don't know if a class really would do it. I think it really comes down to the people that are around you. So you might have a class where there's this like teacher that's on fire with passion, gets you involved in things, but I think that it's really a community. Like even being at the library here, you meet people that want to invest in you. So I met some folks that kind of opened up the doors for me after I asked them some questions, and they're like, hey, you want to be involved in this? You want to be involved in that? And they threw me into a couple of things. And so I don't know if it's necessarily a class. Yeah, take some classes, but it's really a community thing.
Okay.
And finding people that, there are so many people that are willing to invest, especially in young people, in any way, whether it be financially or just their time or opening doors and getting them involved with opportunities. Tons of people like that. You just got to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is something that you wish was taught in schools that really isn't?
I would say to be bold in asking questions, to be honest. And so I guess an example of that, one thing that kind of shaped me too, is I was watching a Netflix documentary. And I actually was so enthused by it that I reached out to the guy who put the Netflix documentary on, and he responded.
Yeah.
So like, if you don't ask, then you never really would know.
Sure.
And so ask those huge questions of people. And like, he ended up having me come out to DC. He lived in Maryland, so he brought me out to his house, brought me into his home. And I was like, wow, just by me asking and inquiring, like, hey, how did you come to be this way? Why did you do this documentary? Can I buy you a steak? And he's like, yeah. So he's like, next time you're out here, come on by. And I did, so it was pretty awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I need to ask more questions.
You never know what a person's going to respond like. So.
All right. I like that. I'm going to keep that in mind.
Uh-huh.
So what are you most proud of during your time in office?
So, a couple things. One would be, so auto insurance reform was a huge issue when I was running first. We got that passed last term. That was a big deal. So on a constituent level, that was really big. But secondary, I have a lot of former students that are graduating even right now that have been reaching out, and I've been able to write letters of recommendation for.
Oh.
And so those are things that I'm really, really excited about, or I'm connecting to them, trying to connect them to people that might help them in their pursuits.
Okay.
And so I've been able to really use some of the honor of the office, some of the connections I've been able to make to get some of these young people that I know very well. I know with the integrity card over at Niles New Tech, it's all about a person's reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to try to help some of these young people who they know that I care about their life and their pursuits, being able to open some doors for them, I think is the most exciting part of the job.
How cool to have a letter of recommendation from a state rep.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, so I'm going to sneak in a super secret 11th question.
Awesome.
What is your favorite book? It can be a kid's book, teen book, even legislation.
My favorite book is called The Cost of Discipleship from Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Okay.
So I went to Germany to go try to learn some about his life. He actually was a pastor during World War II. He died 2 weeks in a concentration camp before the Allies liberated him.
Oh.
But he wrote this book, he wrote several others that were just deeply impactful, especially in my walk. And really, when you have kind of a leading voice and someone who lived the way they wrote and the way that they spoke, that's something that, having that and being in the forefront of my mind is really important. Because it's easy to say some stuff and be like, oh, this sounds really good, and say it, but to live that way as well is another story. So that's a fantastic book.
Oh, great. I'll have to add that to my to-reads list because I've
For
heard
sure,
of that guy.
for sure, he's great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
on our
you.
very first 10 questions. We hope you've enjoyed the video as well. Make sure to subscribe to Niles District Library Virtual Programming on YouTube. It's down there somewhere. And make sure to follow Brad Paquette and all of his legislative news. All right, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Brad,
Thank
for joining us. Thank you to Jerry Holtgren and Nick Holly and Marie Culbertson from Niles New Tech for all of the students' great questions. We really appreciate you guys. We'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks for watching. Bye, friends.
Bye.